Yes, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Kev from the gym. I'm going to try and keep this video under 10 minutes. Right, Itauma versus Hrgovic. I am excited for this fight. You know, I was excited when it first got announced, and then the championship was on the line. And now, after just watching their weigh-in, okay, listen, look, Itauma is the favorite. He's heavy favorite in terms of the bookies. I think everyone expects him to go out and be as explosive and as exciting as he has been in the past couple of fights and win early. But for me, I don't see predictions as a binary sort of thing. I think there's always a bit of a sliding scale. So even where I think one outcome is likely or the most probable, I do think there are a couple of outcomes that are also possible. And I sort of see my predictions as a bit of a sliding scale. So there are a couple of scenarios that I would give some percentages to in terms of how I predict this fight. And I think the first is Itauma win, and Itauma win early. I think this is what probably 99% of boxing fans and pundits think is going to happen. They think Itauma is going to be too fast, too explosive. He's going to get to Hrgovic early on. And I can understand why someone would think that. Itauma is very quick with his hands, very quick with his feet. Now, Hrgovic has got a very good chin. In my opinion, he's got the best chin in heavyweight boxing. Okay, he's got a very tough chin. Hasn't been dropped or even really hurt, if you like, by the likes of Dubois, David Adelaide, big punches, Zile Zhang, big punches. He's had difficult moments in those fights, typically because he loses concentration or he gets a cut. But in terms of being completely rocked and out of it, he's got a very good chin. Yeah, he's got extremely good chin. However, the difference here, I think, is that with Itauma, it's not just about power per se, it's about the speed. And sometimes it's speed that kills, it's the punches that you don't see. So whilst Hrgovic does have a great chin, and I think it's hard to knock him out from a power point of view, I think Itauma has got the speed to give anyone problems where you get clipped with shots that you don't see, hands coming from everywhere, fast feet, next thing you know, you're on the floor. And I think as good as Hrgovic's chin is, there's still a possibility that he can get clipped and can get clipped early. So that is probably the most obvious prediction. And for me, that's probably a 50%. I'd give it about 50% chance of happening. So the likelihood of Itauma winning early, first 6 rounds, just being too fast, too explosive, too quick. Hrgovic is quite slow, very good fundamentally, great jab. He throws a lot of punches. I think he's got the most output for heavyweight in terms of punch volume and output. So, you know, very durable, great straight punches, 1-2s. But he is quite slow. So you'd think Itauma's speed will give him a lot of problems. So that's the first potential outcome. And I think that has a decent chance of happening. But I think there are some potential scenarios that I can see playing out that I'm not sure a lot of people have thought about. Okay. Now, Itauma hasn't gone past 5 rounds. We don't really know what his gas tank is like. He went from being a superb amateur as a youth, which is, you know, 3 rounds into the pros. He hasn't really gone past 5 rounds yet. Obviously, you'd hope and imagine that he's doing the rounds in the gym and he's working on his stamina and his fitness. But these things, sometimes you don't know until you know. And until you get tested under the bright lights in the ring, you're not so sure how your conditioning is going to be. So there is a question mark as to if Itauma doesn't get Hrgovic out early in the first 2, 3, 4 rounds, what is he going to look like when you get to the middle rounds? Some people thought that against Franklin in just before the stoppage, maybe the round or 2 before, he was starting to slow down a little bit, some people said. And maybe, you know, if he doesn't get Hrgovic out early, is he going to start questioning himself? Is the occasion going to get to him? He does seem a little bit more riled up than he usually is, so that's going to burn energy as well. So that can definitely play a part of it. I think, personally, after the first round, I think I'll know which way this fight would go. If Itauma gets on the front foot and he's pushing Hrgovic back, then I think he gets him out of there early. If Hrgovic does what he did against Dubois early, which is basically command the centre of the ring and just pump that double jab and right hand and just go for it from the center, pushes Itauma back, then I think it's going to be interesting for the first couple of rounds. 100%, I do think it'll be interesting. So the second scenario is it goes past the middle rounds. Itauma doesn't get Hrgovic out of there. What happens then? Does Hrgovic start to pile on the pressure in the middle to late rounds? He's been tried, he's been tested. And does Itauma sort of buckle under the pressure? Potentially. I do see maybe about 25% chance that Itauma doesn't get Hrgovic out early, and then the tide changes. You get to round 5, round 6, and Hrgovic is on the ascendancy. Hrgovic is throwing a gazillion punches. He's pushing Itauma back. Itauma's maybe hasn't got the conditioning or the fitness because we haven't seen it potentially. And Hrgovic forces a stoppage between rounds sort of 7 to 10. I can see that as a possibility. Again, I sort of deal with sliding scales. So Itauma early is probably most likely outcome. But if I was a betting man, and I'm not a betting man, but if I was, there probably isn't a lot of money in that. So I would probably think, right, what else is possible that you maybe can see happening? And I think Hrgovic to ride the storm early and to get Itauma out between round 7 and 10, sort of middle to late rounds, I do think it's a possibility. Okay. Now, third scenario, and this is probably actually what if I was a betting man, this is what I'd bet on. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, this is what I would bet on. I would bet on both fighters to get dropped early within the first sort of 3 or 4 rounds. I'd bet on both fighters to get dropped and win. So either fighter to get dropped and win. I do think there's going to be some ebbs and flows in this fight, and I can definitely see a little bit of a Hagler-Hearns type fight for the first couple of rounds, potentially. I think Itauma's speed, he's so quick that even if he doesn't necessarily hurt Hrgovic, he can drop him just because he's so fast and so quick. So I can see that happening. But at the same time, if Hrgovic does what he did against Dubois early on and tries to push Itauma back, he holds the center of the ring and he throws volume with the 1-2s. Who's to say how Itauma's going to deal with punches coming back at him? We don't know. We haven't seen it under the lights. You know, some people say that he hasn't been tested. He hasn't really been hit to the chin. We don't know how he's going to react. His older brother had one professional loss and he was KO'd by a quote-unquote journeyman. So, you know, there's a narrative out there that his brother didn't have a chin. Does a Itauma, Moses Itauma, not have a chin also? I don't know if I buy into all of that. The best chins don't get hit, but at the same time, it's boxing. You swim, you're going to get wet. So eventually you are going to get tested. You're going to get clipped in the chin. And how are you going to react? We do not know. Okay. But I potentially can see some ebbs and flows in this, with both fighters having to walk through a bit of fire. I can definitely see Itauma dropping Hrgovic early just based on the speed. Not necessarily that Hrgovic will be hurt, but just based on the speed. But then I can also see Hrgovic riding that storm, coming back into it, pushing Itauma back, and Itauma unraveling a little bit. And what does that look like? Does he get dropped? Does he not have the gas tank? Does his corner start to get a little bit worried? One thing I'd say as well, I love Ben Davison and his team as technical coaches. I think he's one of the best coaches. I'll put it out there right now. From a technical point of view, I think he does improve fighters. My only concern with him has always been sometimes I think his advice in the corner can be too complicated and too complex. So when his fighters hurt and you need a calm head and very basic instructions to help him get back into the fight, I feel like sometimes him and his team can overcomplicate it a little bit. So we've seen that a couple of times. We saw it in the Joshua versus Dubois fight, in my opinion. We've seen it in other fights too, in my opinion. So what happens if Itauma's hurt and he needs to ride a bit of a storm and it's a new experience for him, a new experience for his corner team, seeing him in that situation? Are they going to be able to navigate him through those treacherous waters? I'm not so sure. So sliding scale, scenario 1, Itauma does the job and does the job early, gets Hrgovic out of there just too fast, too quick, too explosive. First 5 rounds. I think that's got a fair chance of happening. I think that's probably option 1. For me, the next likelihood, in my opinion, is a bit of a back and forth. ebbs and flows, both fighters getting dropped. If I was a betting man, I would bet on both fighters to get knocked down. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would say that's got a good chance of happening. Both fighters to get knocked down, and whoever wins to overcome a bit of adversity, ride a bit of a storm, and to dig out a result. And the other option was, can Hrgovic basically stay alive in the first couple of rounds and then drown Itauma in the mid to late rounds? I do think that's possible as well, because, you know, will Itauma unravel if he doesn't get him out of there in the first 5 rounds? If he gets to the mid rounds where he has to maybe get a second win, where he is taking shots, we'll see. Other points to mention, Hrgovic always gets cuts. It's likely that he'll get cut in this fight, probably. So, you know, will that play a part in it? Maybe, potentially, we shall see. But it's a great fight. And just through the fight week, the way it's sort of been built up now, I can see a bit of agitation in Moses Itauma. He looks like he's, yeah, he just looks like he's ready to fight, obviously, but he's got a bit more bite about him, a bit more spite about him, and it seems a bit more personal now. And maybe that's because of some of the comments that Hrgovic made. Maybe he's got under his skin. Hrgovic has played a perfect villain or heel or whatever. He's done a great job in selling the fight, calling Itauma a kid and saying he's going to take him back to high school and all that. So I do think he's got under his skin a little bit. Whether that translates into the fight or not, we shall see. Itauma favourite, which makes sense, but do not be surprised, in my opinion, if there is a bit of an ebb and flow. Both fighters get dropped, and whoever wins has to come through a bit of adversity. And in that scenario, you probably I would edge to Hrgovic. But it's a good fight. So yeah, a couple of different options, a couple of different scenarios. Itauma's the local lad, so let's root for him. I mean, I want him to win. But it's a great fight. Make the best man win. And yeah, it's Kev from the gym. Please like, comment, and subscribe. A bit of a half-hearted prediction, but just putting out some thoughts that people might not think about or consider, which I always find interesting with some of these big fights, where there are sort of nuances that that might come into play. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.